How y'all doing out there? I'm Daymyen Layne, and I'm on the chopping block at visceralchange.org.
How's everybody doing? We're back. New episode of the Chopping Block. I'm here with my brother, my family, mentor, friend, one of the men in my wedding, one of the groomsmen, Daymyen Layne. D-Lane, what's going on, man?
Yes, sir. I'm doing well, man. Trying to gear up for the fall, whatever it's going to look like.
Yeah, man, out there in institutions of higher education, it's been super interesting seeing how they've developed, man, during COVID. Have y'all seen some serious struggles or nothing crazy?
So Connecticut's actually been pretty good. I'm at Quinnipiac University, and we're in Connecticut right here, not too far from Yale.
Right.
Yale's right in New Haven, Quinnipiac's in Hamden, a town next door. And, between all the issues that New York had, and you're from New England, so you can drive through 5 states in one day. It's not like Arizona or Texas, right? Where you're in one state driving for 20 hours. So between New York and all the issues that they've had where everyone lives on top of each other, I'm a New York native, so I know how that is, right? There's literally nothing you can do. Wherever you go, there's droves and droves of people. Connecticut, you have a little bit more space, a little bit more spaced out, so we haven't had too many issues up here. Obviously, we're dealing with it just like everybody else is, with people trying to get tested, and the state trying to figure out what that means to reopen back in phases. Right. And right now we're in phase 3. And then on the other side of us, you have Massachusetts, right, who's dealing with some of the same. But the city of Boston and the city of New York, I've lived in both for equal amounts of time, almost at least 11 years in Boston and 14 years in New York. And Boston, you do have a little bit more breathing room, right? You just don't have the massive amounts of people that you would in New York. Still a large city, obviously, but in a large metropolitan area. But you just don't have the where everybody's on top of each other in New York. Yeah. So New York had their own set of issues. Boston had their own set of issues, and Connecticut somehow stayed out of the fray.
Which is interesting, man. I see it's like this. It's the gray sort of blot on the map, at least pretty consistently in terms of COVID. Yeah, man, that's interesting, man. Well, I know the people are looking forward to hearing a little bit more about you and what you do. I know you, man. I know you well. You know me well. And I can comfortably say, at least from my perspective, that your trajectory has been unlike anything I've seen in terms of higher ed professionals. You've gone from operations to Res Life as an assistant director to a director of residential education at a massive Research One institution, to now multicultural engagement. I mean, tell me about that journey and what you've learned to be some of the similarities and the differences that sort of got you to where you are, or that sort of manifest.
Yeah, for sure. So my journey, as you said, hasn't been the typical journey for anyone that deals specifically with equity and inclusion or multiculturalism or anything like that. But I was planting seeds along the way, right? And I had to do that with my extra time. I had to do that sort of on my own personal journey, just because of the identities that I hold, right? So yeah, as you said, man, I kind of cut my teeth and got my chops through residence life. I started out in the operations side where I found myself at Boston College building this graduate housing program where it was the first of its kind. It was all off campus. BC had never done this before, but it allowed me the opportunity to build sort of the co-curricular programs as well. So it was an interesting experience. You had all the operations pieces where you're managing this real estate portfolio off campus. So I'm cutting my teeth in business, but I'm also cutting my teeth in the business of managing people, right? And that's how I look at sort of student affairs or residence life. I always looked at it as the business of managing people. And and we know, when we talk about multiplicity or multiculturalism, we always talk about, or diversity, whatever you want to call it, right? You always talk about different identities and how they meld together. And that was something that I had to do, right? So that was a constant string. Then I went to Salem State, which is a much smaller, mid-sized public institution. And I did that purposefully, right? And I'll mention purpose a couple times. I did that purposefully because what I found at Boston College was this certain string of socioeconomic power that kept rearing its ugly head, and I actually found it getting in the way of student development in certain ways. So, with my background, raised by a single mother in New York City, one of 7 children, I purposefully wanted to work with a different demographic of student where folks were coming from tougher socioeconomic backgrounds. And you found some of those students at Boston College, but the typical student, if you had a cookie cutter student that went to Boston College, it was, came from an affluent background, small town, what have you, or a large city, but very affluent family.
That's right.
Which at Salem State, and we both did our grad work there, I think you come across non-traditional students all the time. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to work with a little bit of a non-traditional student, and I was still in operations at that point, but with the information that I was able to grab at BC and the experience that I was able to grab, not only with operations, but technologically, right? Yes. Which and I always talk about equity and access, and there's no greater way to do that than through technology. So I was able to build Boston College's first online housing program. And then I was able to build Salem State's first online housing program, right? With working with a third-party company that had the software, but I would bring it in, tailor it to the needs of the university. So another interesting experience, but I was also creating equity and access for students. Now, all the way I talked about planting seeds. So at Boston College, I'm doing work with the Multicultural office, working with their Maze mentoring program, where we would take a student from their freshman year all the way through their senior year, right? And we would pair them up with faculty and staff mentors, and we would pretty much handhold these students throughout their entire transition of the 4 or 5 years, however long it took them to finish undergrad. So transferable skills that I've taken throughout my journey, right? Being on the operations side, a lot of people forget that universities, colleges and universities, it's a big business as well, right? So I talked about a little bit about the business of managing people, and that's where the operations piece comes in. So my ability to sort of understand bottom lines, to understand budgets, to understand, the numbers behind resources and where they go. And most people talk about equity and inclusion on campus as an unfunded mandate. So we're in the process of building a wellness center, but within that space, you can't build a wellness center with a university that's named Quinnipiac University without thinking about a land acknowledgement statement, right, for the Quinnipiac people. And the land that the college is built on. So I find myself sort of merging all of these different experiences with the understanding of how a college works, or how a university works, from the budget aspect, the people aspect, the physical aspects as well, and just trying to merge all of those together to make the biggest impact in students' lives, and to try to help along the ways in which faculty and staff interact, engage, and try to lead students.
For sure, man. Yeah, and you offered a ton there, man. But one thing that always sticks with me, just from knowing you in the past and to present, is you've always referred to student affairs as the business of managing people, man. I use that as well, because that's always stuck with me, because that's really what it is. And I remember when I was flirting between dissertation topics, one thing I was thinking about was this idea of it's good until it works, with respect to diversity and inclusion, whether it's a chief diversity officer position or just to speak to the roles and the expectations of that role in general. I mean, people love it until it's actually working, and then it's like, wait a minute, I'm not quite sure if we can invest in this. So you mentioned Boston College. I'm not quite sure what those demographics are, but I want to talk a little bit about demographics of Blackness, though, on some other institutions and locations. I mean, so we know Oneonta, sort of 4.6% Black. Salem, Mass, about 5.2% Black. Tucson's 5% Black. I'm sure Boston College isn't much greater than that. So you touched a little bit about this, but talk about how your experience in these predominantly white institutions and settings has prepared you for your role now as director, where Quinnipiac's Black population is only 4.12%.
Yeah, and I think this is the crux that every Black person in student affairs has to manage at some point, right? Or the cross that I think we have to bear, without getting too religious. We're thinking about our own experiences and what happened to us on campus, or how we decided to go to college, or if we come from a first generation family, or what have you, right? We take that and we internalize it. And then we either love our experience, or we're somewhere in the middle, or we despise it. But we always want to change it in some capacity for students that might be in our shoes.
Yes.
So I think that's what drives me, right? I've seen these students at Boston College, and if you talk about scale, right? If you look at a small private, or if you look at a large private, right? If you talk about scale, it all scales up, right?
Yeah.
You would find the same issues on campus in terms of diversity, in terms of mismanagement of issues, once things happen nationally, right? From and I'm talking about from senior leadership to where they either decide to speak out, and a lot of presidents are symbolic leaders, right? Like you become pretty much the mayor of a small town almost. So the mismanagement of different issues is the same, just the scale is different. It's literally just, in my experience, it's literally just a matter of if you're in the paper or not.
Right.
How leadership sometimes pushes folks from marginalized backgrounds towards marginalized issues on campus. I think that's the same, right? So if you keep seeing the same issues, and it doesn't matter what sector you're in, right? If you're in large private, large public research one, and the demographics are really what's driving this, right? And we all know about the browning of America, which is this impending rolling of numbers to where the dominant group won't be the dominant group for much longer,
sure,
right? In America or in higher education. So, I found myself in places where I'm trying to make sure universities are better prepared for this, to manage student experience, right? If I can change, and I had to scale it down for myself in terms of expectations of how much I can change on campus,
right.
which was something that was interesting for my career. It was almost like this awakening to where I'm like, I always saw myself when I'm getting promotions, right? I'm like, okay, now I'm an assistant director. I'll be able to manage this, and this policy. Okay, now, I skipped the associate director piece. Now I'm a director. I'll be able to affect all of these policies, and I get to manage a staff of 30 with 600 students, and I'll be able to directly affect what policies are in place where, right? But what I always found was that things roll downhill, right? So if you don't have leadership at the top thinking about inclusion, or thinking about inclusive practice, or the journey to it,
right,
then it doesn't matter how much you affect those practices because you'll always run into roadblocks.
That's right. That's right.
Right. So,
That's right.
so across all of those experiences, I just found myself in a place where I wanted to change that student experience
Yeah.
for students to where it was a little bit different than what I experienced on campus, or they had just another resource to go to on campus. So, throughout our careers, I think we have to figure out what drives us, what our purpose is,
Mm-hmm.
what wakes you up in the morning, um, and try to work within that, and then try to create as much change as possible from there.
Sure. No, that's profound. I mean, there's no question about it. And as someone himself who has been multiple times the only Black body in a majority white space, whether that is just a meeting or sort of a large gathering, or and maybe in some cases an entire department, it is difficult. But we are shaped by some of those past experiences in those PWIs that have taught us, as we used to talk about how, being Black becomes a life skill. And that life skill is what allows us to be able to navigate places from Oneonta to, I'm guessing, maybe Quinnipiac in your situation. So sticking with this theme of being, oh, no, go ahead, chime in.
I was going to say not only a life skill, but a survival skill.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sometimes they're one and the same, but we've talked about this in the past to where that becomes a certain skill set of survival, right? And I think about that notion of being the only Black body in a white space, or the meeting after the meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where if it's me and you in a room, we're like, hey, you got 2 minutes? To where
exactly.
that time to reconnect with somebody who shares an identity with you, and you just try to recharge a little bit before you go back into that white space. So it's interesting.
Yeah, that's huge, man. The meeting after the meeting is very real.
Oh, yeah.
Sticking with the idea of being shaped, right? We all know the Layne family is deep. You understand? 7 kids, right?
7, yeah.
7 kids, man. Talk to us, man, about how that experience now has shaped the man you are, right? The character and your outlook on life.
It's interesting. Growing up, my mom, well before the Golden State Warriors had this trend, this notion of strength in numbers.
Mm-hmm.
So what I talk about in my work a lot, what I talk about a lot today, in my work is this idea of a critical mass, of trying to build that within your space. And this becomes sort of that another one of those survival sort of practices, to where not only for students, right, where they start rolling up to this critical mass, and students become a part of collegiate recruitment, to where they're engaging in admissions fairs and things like that, to where they're trying to pull in other students of color, but for faculty and staff as well, right? Like, you try to build this little bit of critical mass, to where you can feel safe.
Yes.
And not just physically safe. A lot of times when we talk about safety, it's mental as well.
That's right.
Right. So this notion of being the only one, we try to do away with that. But yeah, man, a lot of my work tries to center this idea of trying to build a critical mass. And I preach this to students, I preach it to faculty, I preach it to staff. Again, a lot of that has to come from leadership. But when you talk about ownership of your experience, when you talk about if your experience is happening to you, or if you're happening to it, and manifestation wise, a lot of these students don't understand that they can create some of what their experience is at these PWIs.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, when I was at Hartwick College, we brought the first historically Black fraternity on campus. Iota Phi Theta organization, incorporated. No, so we brought Iota Phi Theta on campus, and I was one of the founding members of that line 20 years ago now. But experiences like that, further let me know that we have ultimate control over what our experience is like on these campuses. And we don't have to leave it up to senior leadership, because I didn't go to the president. I could have. Richard Detweiler at the time was his name. I could have went to the president. I had that sort of relationship with him that I could have. And at smaller schools, sometimes you have that, where I could have asked him, how do we go about this? Like, what can you do? No, we set it up. We brought it to campus. Whether they liked it or not, it was happening.
That's
right. And then you learn to work with administration and you get all the paperwork right and whatever. But it was rolling before, before they came to the table. So a lot of what I talk about is ownership. Ownership of your own experience.
Right. And I'm guessing, knowing D-Lane squared, the donors of the house, that ownership piece was hammered in, sort of that own yourself, own your moments. Yeah.
Yeah. Ownership of your experience, that strength in numbers. My mom sort of, ingrained that in us.
Yeah.
The women in my household are all older as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I come from a very matriarchal household.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking literal. There was my grandmother, my mom, my 3 sisters, and then the 4 boys.
Okay.
So respect for women was always there, which made me think about, how I carry myself in this world, how I work within my own identity, the certain male privilege that I have
mm-hmm.
in the U.S. and how that affects different rooms that I'm in. So you walk with it every day.
That's right.
You walk with it every day. You don't often. I don't think a lot of people think about. Well, maybe they do. I don't think a lot of people think about sort of family values or what was ingrained in them as they're growing up.
Right.
Some people just move through the world as they naturally would because they can. Another one of those life skills, man. It's just strength and numbers, critical mass, strength and numbers.
Yeah. No, I do. I absolutely do. I mean, I come from so my number's just one shy of yours. I come from a 6-member family of the kids. And so, you talked about, instilling some of that critical mass and understanding the importance of owning oneself. I mean, that's exactly what I would share my experience to be as well. When it came to, my grandfather used to always say, if my name's on it, I'm never going 50%. We don't go halfway. If my name's on it, we're going in, so all that comes from that experience we have as kids, man, and really looking up to those important figures in our lives, especially in the immediate family. I want to dig in a little bit, man, for our last few questions here. Here we are again, man. You know what I mean? You and I were together at Salem, as we kind of talked about, during Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland. We were together in Tucson for Charlottesville. So I know better than most sort of the impact that the taking of Black lives has on our Black students, our Black staffs, and our Black faculty, especially in spaces where they are not the majority, and more than that, man, I know how important that is to you and your roles and how much you take responsibility for each person's individual feeling about it, being the empath that you are, for sure. How have you responded? And I don't necessarily mean you specifically, but how have you in your role been able to respond to the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and how do you think it's been received, man?
So I think, first and foremost, I think we'd be remiss to say this hasn't been difficult, right? I think every time we come to these flashpoint moments in history, to where you see something happen like a George Floyd or a Breonna Taylor, and the list goes on, right? Ahmaud, well, he was going out for a run. Right. It becomes difficult in terms of process on your own.
Yep.
Then you feel this grave responsibility, right? And I don't know if you would call it survivor's remorse, right? my undergrad's in psychology, so I always go back to these psychological
Sure.
explanations. But you feel this grave responsibility to like either act or make sure people are okay. You mentioned the empathy piece, and I try to lead with empathy every day. Like that's another one of my driving forces. So I feel like I feel it a little bit deeper than the normal Joe Schmo, but trying to operate in spaces where folks don't hold that identity in the majority, you know, folks will call a meeting the next day and they'll just go about their business.
Yep.
Like nothing
Yeah.
ever happened. Like
Yep.
these images of Black death and the Black body aren't being strewn
Yes.
the tube or
Yes.
phones or computers, whatever device we open up. And that's, you know, that's one thing that this generation has to deal with that previous generations didn't, right? It took a while for you to hear that something happened, or you had to read a paper a couple days later or what have you. Right now, as soon as something is blasted across the web, it's on your feed.
Yep.
In 30 different places, with however many networks you have.
Instantly. Yep.
Instant. So, you know, I think we all deal with vicarious trauma. I've tried to manage that myself with a little bit of I've started to meditate, you know, with either Headspace or the Calm app or the Breathe app, my phone, you know, but I found myself waking up in almost panic states where heart was pounding, I couldn't really breathe, right? And I'm not trying to be metaphorical there, like
Right.
I was having heart palpitations, you know, and I couldn't understand why, but this kept happening, and I started doing this 3-5-3 breathing technique.
Okay.
That really helped me kind of calm my mind, and sort of calm my body to function and manage, you know, because you have all this energy that you can't do anything with.
Right.
So how I put that into the work, or how I've tried to respond to that, man, I've tried to create healing space
Sure.
for folks, right? So every Friday at 5:00, what started as, you know, this check-in for me to check in with Black males, or males of color on Quinnipiac's campus, actually turned into a therapeutic space, right? It started as a check-in about COVID.
Yep.
Hey, you know, we just shut down in March, right around the middle of March. Everybody had to go home, couldn't come back from spring break. Just want to know how you cats are doing. And then at the end of that first call, right? I mean, obviously we had talked about Ahmaud during that first call, and I don't think George Floyd had happened yet. I asked, hey, do you guys want to do this bi-weekly? Like, you guys want to have another check-in in a month? Like, let me know. And they're like, we're home. You know, it's just us and our schoolwork. We're not doing anything. Everybody's in quarantine. How about weekly? So I was like, okay, all right, let's do it. So it's been a steady stream, man, since March. Every Friday at 5, I'll get cats on the call, and I'm talking like current undergrads, people who have just graduated, who are no longer affiliated with the school.
Sure.
They check back in just to see how folks are doing. You had some folks who had COVID, some folks who are going to protest in New York. So the conversation goes all over, man.
That's huge. That's huge, man, because, you know, I think about the Brotherhood days, man. And, you know, we had everybody there, undergrad, grads, faculty, staff, tenured professors, didn't matter. And folks were engaged in receiving the discussion as if, you know, we all went through the same thing at the same time. And, you know, nobody was pulling rank. There was no elitism. Nobody was trying to teach. No one was trying to preach. It was just,
I don't know if you remember this, but we also had the high school students as well.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So
right.
you even saw it from another level, to where, you know, the stuff that we were doing, the cats on campus started doing in real time.
Yes.
It's one of the most mind-blowing things as well, man. But I've just tried to create space for healing, not only for myself, but for other folks as well.
That's huge, man. I actually want to jump off that a little bit, man. I'm all about leaving legacies, fam. I mean, I'm all about trying to make sure I can institute something that is going to have an impact, man, and that, you know, really affirms and solidifies my hire, or, you know, my contract and my personhood and my commitment to the work. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about some of the broader initiatives that you've been able to create in your short time at QU, or if you have some others that are on the horizon. You started talking about Quilt a little bit, so maybe that's one of them. But some other things that maybe you have cooking in the kitchen.
Yeah. So you had talked about mentoring a little while ago, and that's something that we take to heart. We have this program again with the acronyms. Excuse me. We have this program called Quest, Quinnipiac University Enriching Student Transition. Um, Quest mentoring program, that's in effect. First year students, they're paired up with either juniors, sophomores or juniors on campus, and these are all either first gen or students of color or international students, anyone from a marginalized background.
Sure.
And then we have another layer to that where it's faculty and staff. But what we're trying to build in this sort of alignment of experience, right? With Quest specifically, to where we're trying to build a cohort model of mentors, if you will. So as they're going through their programming with their mentees, you know, we'll have faculty and staff engagement with the cohort of mentors. This year we have 20 on campus. So it's a pretty good crew, man. People enjoy it. People find the gems where they will. But this alignment, it also works with other programs. So this year we're piloting our first sort of summer bridge program,
right,
called QU FYI, First Year Immersion. And the QU FYI program is supposed to be a 2-week residential, to where folks come back early and they get their feet wet on campus. They're connected to resources. They're jacked in with the Quest mentors earlier, right? So you go through FYI. Hopefully, you would come back and be a Quest mentor, and then you kind of move on. We're also building in a living learning community, which is culturally based housing, and that's sort of coming to fruition. This year, we're operating in a space in conjunction with the Global Living LLC that's on campus, which has some roots in international service learning, some roots in with exposing students to different cultures and different international students across the world. We got a lot going on, man. This training piece is the largest piece right now. You know, with everything that's going on with uprisings across the country, I think everybody's operating off of the fierce urgency of now, and everybody wants to do something right now.
That's right.
I think a lot of colleagues are operating off of white guilt, and some of them need to back off of that. But it's a double-edged sword, because on the one hand you have that, on the other hand you have this energy where people are treating my office like the consultant type of office that they should, right? They're reaching out before they put out a document, or they're reaching out before they put on a program, or they're reaching out, you know, before they institute a policy. Sure. Right now, and you did some work with this in the past, right now we're working on sort of a First Amendment or protesting policy, right? Nice. Because Quinnipiac has never had this in the past. So, you know, I brought this to our student conduct folks, and actually our Greek life folks were involved in that as well, because the question kept coming up of, what do we do if and when students protest? There's already talks about students doing a walkout. You know, at Syracuse, you saw students occupy a building. What happens if we do that? Like, how does university police respond?
Right.
So speaking of university police, we're building a relationship with them as well, to where it's not like this flash in the pan one-off training,
right,
but we have sort of this long-term, plotted out experience that officers can go through, where we cultivate conversations and different experiences for them. to intentionally teach them about different ideologies of power and privilege.
Sure. Great.
Across campus. So there's a lot going on, man. And right now with everything that's going on across the world, it's like every day somebody wants to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point we're gonna have to figure out resources and funding, because my office is an office of 3 people.
Yeah, man. I mean, that's some legitimate work, man. And the work's not easy. And you talk about, providing space for young men of color and providing the space for Black men in particular. And it makes me think about, the barbershop. And we both have had experience with work like that. And, I know you've been able to champion that. Have you seen the fruits of that, in any way? Like, has that stuck with you since Salem State?
Absolutely. So at Quinnipiac, we're actually building the barbershop talks. It's called.
Oh, hey.
It's called The Cut.
What's it called? The Cut?
It's called The Cut.
Solid.
Right? So we're officially branding that. We're producing it full out with marketing as a show. We have the first 3 pilot episodes already shot. They're cutting that up, and I'm talking about, we had 5 cameras going. We had a camera that was panning the whole time.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a crazy kind of shoot, and they were hyped about it when I brought the idea during my interview. But to see what it turned into, and you got the opening short with like the slow motion of the barber flipping the cape, and like it's. I'll actually send you some.
I gotta see it.
Early footage, man. But in the next coming weeks, I don't think you see me until like episode 3.
Okay.
Because I'm doing it in conjunction with my VP of Equity and Inclusion. I want him to get in there for the first 2 episodes. 1, to open us, but 2, the second episode we focused a lot on hip hop. And he teaches a class at Quinnipiac, the sociology of hip hop. So I definitely wanted him in there. And we have students that we talk to, and the barber, man, cats is getting cut up in the chair, and it's fantastic, man. So it's gonna grow from here. We're already in talks about the next shoot, and it's all about creating that space for students. We all know that the barbershop is a staple in the Black community,
yep.
And it's a piece of therapy for Black men. So it's been fantastic, man.
That's gonna be crazy, man. I'm super amped for that, especially the direction you're taking it. I remember, because that was profound at Salem, and I remember I was able to do a little something at UNC that found its way to a recording, but nothing at all like, I don't think, like what you're saying here with Quinnipiac, and this is gonna be.
Guys were mic'd up.
I need the director's cut, man. So, thank you for being here on the Chopping Block. D-Layne, before we let you go, man, tell us where people can get in touch with you, man. Do you have any hashtags, any @, any publications, any podcasts? Where can we get in touch with you?
No podcast yet, but that will be coming, the Lane Change podcast.
Okay.
You can find me on Instagram at DLane6. I'm number 6 of 7 in the family. That's where the 6 comes from. You can find me on Twitter at DLane6 as well. You can find me on Facebook if you can find me.
And do you have you still have your I know you offer your thoughts sometimes, right? A little bit of a web page.
Yeah, that's on pause for now, so I don't want to throw that out there. But
okay, all right then, fam. Hey, thank you so much for being here, man. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends, my family, everybody out there, Daymyen Layne, Sherrod Robbins, with the Chopping Block at visceralchange.org.